The Snicker of Magic, Chapter 19. Tell me the truth, Florentine. Don't hold back. I can handle constructive criticism. I wrung my hands together round and around while she scanned my first poem. Showing Florentine my words made me so nervous that I couldn't shut up talking. Florentine read silently. I figured she was trying to think of a nice way to tell me the poem stunk. I sighed. They're horrible, aren't they? I can write a new batch. I still have a few days. They ain't horrible. Florentine turned the page, her dark eyes scanning my next set of lines. These words are marvelous. I felt lightheaded. Really? Florentine nodded. These are fine words you got here, and Jonah says you got Oliver's dove to keep you calm and steady on stage. I'd say you're about to have a fine dueling day. She winked at me and handed the blue book back. I didn't tell Florentine about Hope flying the coop. The thought of the bird tattoo flying across the ocean and landing on the wrist of Arlie Pickett made me happy. I wanted him to have hope. I wanted him to come home to his family, but I missed having a Snicker of magic on my wrist. I blinked up into the face of the September sun, wondering where the tattoo was right at that moment. Florentine propped her hand over her eyes to shield the light and glanced up at Mama, who stood beside us with her hands on her hips, staring at the gallery. You've been staring at that wall for 20 minutes, Florentine said to her. You'd think it's going to paint itself. I need to figure out how to get the graffiti off first, Mama said. She stepped closer and gently traced her fingers across the letters somebody had painted on the bricks. I watched each word ripple beneath her touch. I need a blank canvas when I start. Not this time, you don't, Florentine chuckled. Whoever painted those words? They were mad. They painted them deep. Heartbreak always makes the words stick extra deep. Mama looked down at Florentine. How do I get them off then? They'll probably bleed through the paint. Probably, Florentine nodded. But you do what you know how to do. You paint something new. Been too long since I'd done this, Mama sighed as she eased down on the sidewalk. She hunched her scrawny shoulders and buried her face in her hands. I don't even know where to start. That's what happens when we're in a place too long. My creativity's just gone. I feel stuck. That's not why you're stuck, I said quickly. You just haven't painted in a long time. Start in this center like you tell me, I said. We've done a bunch of traveling in the pickled jalapeno, and on warm summer nights after sunset, before the dark drops its curtain, I like to stare out the window and wonder. I've seen mountains and wildflowers and wild animals and storms. I've seen the ocean. I've felt it lick up around my ankles like it's something frisky and playful. And I've seen it crash against the rocks, dangerous, a silver-tongued monster. I've seen sweet things like Frankie sleeping and Biscuit snuggling close to me and Cleo slipping extra cash into the pocket of Mama's work uniform. My eyes are tiny, but they've taken in a world full of wonderful. So I can't even imagine how it must feel to see all that wonderful and then be able to touch a paintbrush to a piece of paper or pavement or brick or brittle rock and leave that image right there, exactly the same way your eyes took it in. Mama doesn't just paint mountains or moonlight or people's faces. She paints memories. She paints the joy you feel when you see something wonderful for the very first time. But Mama wouldn't even look at the gallery. I clutched the locket so tight in my fist I wondered if it'd crumble. Enough magic to take her sad away, that's what I wanted. I didn't have that. But I did have my words. Miss Florentine, I said, I'd like to tell you a few things about my mama, Holly Harness Pickle. Do you mind? Sure don't, Florentine drawled. Mama didn't look at us, but I could see her cheek dimple in an almost grin. Okay then, I began. The first thing I painted with Mama was rocks. River rocks we saved from the Cumberland River. We all took home a rock, and we painted one thing we loved on it. I painted the dog, and Franny painted a piece of cheese. That's fancy, Florentine nodded. It truly is, I agreed. And then, when we lived in Birmingham, Mama painted red roses on paper plates, and she taped the plates to my wall. She told me I could fill my garden with any flower I wanted. If I could dream it, I could paint it. That's what she told me. But quite honestly, I can dream up some pretty weird stuff, and it never looked so good when I painted it. When Mama did, it looked even better than it did in my dreams. By the time we moved from that place, the entire wall of my and Franny Joe's room was covered with paper flowers. Mama wasn't looking at the wall anymore. Her body was still turned towards the gallery, but she turned her face toward me, listening. Once Mama painted a map on the roof of the jalapeno. We called it the Kingdom of Spiderberg. Every night we told a story about a new place, and then Mama would paint a new castle on the map. I was the queen of Spiderberg. Rightly so, Florentine nodded. Told Mama maybe we should paint stars up in Spiderberg too. I gulped. But instead of grabbing her paintbrushes, she pulled me and Franny outside, and we stared up at the stars and spun around underneath them until we got spin-diddly-dizzy. She said stars don't mind being painted. And they don't mind sonnets or songs or poems either. Neither. But they'd rather just give you light enough to dance by. That's what she told me. Okay, Mama breathed. She wasn't talking to me or Florentine. Okay, she said again, like she was answering some deep-down question she was afraid to ask out loud. Her hands trembled as she picked up the can of white paint and poured it into her paint tray. She pushed the big paint roller down into the paint until it soaked up all the color. Swish! The roller swiped up and down, over the brick, over the words, over every picture that had been painted there before. My heart felt heavy in a good way again, holding me still in that memory. Mm-hmm, Florentine grinned at me. I just heard you speak hundreds of words, Felicity Pickle. Every last one of them came out of your mouth fine. Mighty fine, in fact. My words are different when I talk about people I gulped, love. Exactly, Florentine said softly. The wind tunneled down Main Street. Florentine groaned and pulled her traveling bag close to her side. I stood up and clamped my hand tight around the locket. The wind didn't rattle Mama, though. She kept swiping the paint roller back and forth across the brick. I watched new words appear, then fizzle with every stroke. Sandstorm, avalanche, fly, away, home to visit, home to stay. You don't have to leave to find a new beginning, Mama. You can begin exactly where you are. That's what I wanted to say to her, but me telling her wouldn't matter. Mama had to see what we were home for herself. Painting the gallery might help a little bit. But breaking the Weatherly curse would set Mama free forever. I could feel it. After Mama had been working for a few hours, I jogged across the street to see how the gallery looked from far off. So I spun around to take a seat on the red bench. I heard Florentine hollering my name from back at the wall. Don't sit there, she yelled. I froze, half squatted, ready to plop myself down. Why? Florentine slung her traveling bag around her shoulder and across the street. 'Cause that bench belongs to Abigail Honeycutt. I glanced back at the empty bench. You think she'll mind if I sit on it? Probably not, Florentine said, but she'll sure mind if you sit on her. She's invisible. Maybe ask first and make sure she's not there. Mama had already told me that Florentine was probably crazy, but crazy in a sweet way, not crazy mean. I knew that Mama's words were most certainly true. All the same, I said, Miss Honeycutt? When nobody answered, Florentine said, You're fine, Nan. She ain't here. Who is she? I whispered, sitting down easily onto the bench. That's a better story for Oliver to tell. He tells it right. Florentine pulled her bag tight against her side. I only know bits and pieces about people who used to live in this town. I don't know the full story. Thanks for all those kind things you said back then, Mama said as we walked back to Cleo's. She leaned down and kissed the top of my head. I flung my arm around her waist and said, You're welcome. I can't wait to tell Jonah what Florentine said about my poem. I've been meaning to ask you something about Jonah, Mama said, turning us down Main Street. Just when she was about to ask, we passed Dr. Zook's Dreamery Creamery. The door swung open, and Uncle Boone walked out carrying 2 ice cream cones. Perfect timing, he said. He gave one cone to Mama and one to me. Boone's banjo was strapped to his back like always. He slung it around in front of him and winked. I figured I'd play y'all home. How does that sound? I wished every day could end that way, with banjo music, sweet ice cream, and street shadows painted long by the setting sun. The world was so beautiful, I nearly forgot about my troubles. About Jonah Pickett, Mama glanced down at me. Do you have a crush on him? Not a crush, I shook my head. More like an inflate. He makes me feel the opposite of crushed. He makes my heart feel like a balloon, like it's going to blow up and fly right out of my chest. Boone sighed. I might have to use that in a song, Felicity Pickle. Jonah's a sweet boy, Mama said, But you know you don't have to participate in the duel to impress him, right? You can back out if it scares you." "Why would it scare you?" Boone asked. "You didn't get worked up over that stupid curse, did you?" Mama stopped walking. Her hand clamped down tight on my shoulder. Why would she know about that? She narrowed her eyes at my uncle. Boone shrugged. "You know how people talk. It doesn't matter anyway. It's a story, Liz. It's got nothing to do with you." "Boone," Mama warned. Then she looked down at me. "You are not cursed, Felicity." I nodded, even though I didn't believe her. Even though I was pretty sure Boone didn't either. The curse had everything to do with me, which is exactly why I had to figure out how to break it. "You don't have to do the duel." Mama tightened her arm around my shoulders. "If you change your mind, if you get nervous—" "I am nervous," I admitted, "but I'm not going to run away." "Atta girl," Uncle Boone cheered. Mama only sighed. Boone strummed a sweet tune as we walked through downtown toward Cleo's apartment. The first evening star showed up in the sky and winked at me. The wind rolled through the streets. The trees shook their branches and beat their tambourine leaves in a strangely perfect rhythm, almost like the trees were clapping along to Boone's music.